So what is the cost of disengagement? We know from Gallup, 21% more productive teams are the ones that are engaged. And we know from ResearchGate that staff average turnover is about 17.8%. And the cost to replace staff members is 33% of their salary. So what we did was create a return on investment tool, which you can find in the resource kit, because the biggest challenge I've seen with all the boards and companies I've worked on as part of the 650 we've engaged with through the ShareTree group, is people don't understand the cost of culture. Every board I've been on, it's all about driving revenue and converting it to either profit or meaningful impact if you're a charity, but it's the same mechanism. And what sits in between those two cogs is people and culture every single time. I even had someone at a high automation packaging and distribution company say, oh no, we're going to fully automate our processes. And I was like, great, that's amazing innovation, but who will build those machines? Who will design the processes? Who will maintain them? And who will interact with them? It's still people. And you can never get away from it being people, unless we get to Terminator type world, which I don't believe is possible. There's an intrinsic value that a human carries that can't be replicated in machines.
Steve, if you...
100% agree. Sorry, I just had to jump because you said something, Stephen, that I'm going against AI, but just for the reason that you just mentioned, because I don't believe that machines are going to be replacing that instincting feeling that human has. So and especially I think human resources, HR is going so fast without thinking the future. They're saying we have to just really use AI with all our processes, but really forget the people piece, which is exactly what is needed in most of the organizations. Yeah. So here's been my topic, the interview that I had, and I don't know how much HR people will like me when they hear that interview, but it's exactly what I believe in, and which organizations are really not thinking right now, especially with the pandemic. All they want to do is automate everything.
Yeah.
And they think that it's going to be successful, but not necessarily.
Yeah.
So it's going to cost them more.
AI is just like money and power. It just amplifies whatever the intention is of the people and culture. I'm a big believer in AI, but it will never replace the qualities of humans.
Yeah, I'm a big believer too. But it's not everywhere. Yeah, I agree. Sorry, I just had to jump in because you just really said something that I said exact words, like on the interview.
There's a place for both, obviously, because, it has to be a mix there. I guess my question was going to be, Steve, you've worked with a lot of different organisations, and something that I see in a lot of organisations is people that have been there a long time, but they're not necessarily the right people anymore because we're trying to move to something up here from where we're here. What have you seen the benefits of ShareTree to try and bring some of these people to actually start considering different ways of doing things and different ways of approaching their role to increase productivity?
Yeah, every person has the capacity to evolve if they choose to. Everything's a choice. We've got a new choice every second. It's just ticking away constantly. But what ShareTree helps leaders and organizations do is have clarity and articulate the clarity of their purpose, their vision, and their values in action. And then it measures them and inspires them to be real within the environment. But it always comes back to the leaders living them first, because the team members will just emulate the leader. Now, even if you've got a super inspiring middle manager or team member that's trying to inspire culture, over time, if the leadership doesn't lead with it, it will erode that person's inspiration and hope, and they will leave. You'll lose a gem. Now, on the flip side, if you become very clear and you have a thriving culture and people are interactive and active about character and culture, then the people that are no longer aligned to that culture will not only see it, they'll feel it. and it's a choice. Then they can choose to shift to move with the culture, or they can choose to find a culture that's better aligned to them.
Yeah.
And what I love about character and culture, there's no wrong and right. But when you have clarity about it, you understand whether you're there with your right family. Yeah, that's the way I would put it.
Yeah,
I see that happening. Go ahead,
yeah.
Yeah.
So sorry, I was just going to say, I think you're 100% right around the leadership aspect. Unless the leaders own it and continue to own it and drive with it, it just drops off again.
Yeah.
And I recall taking groups for just training sessions and having an active audience who want more, but then the organisation doesn't prioritise to keep growing and learning people, so people drop off again. And sometimes as a HR practitioner, when you have the opportunity to start engaging and delivering and then the business can't back it up, that's where you get to that frustration point, because it has to come from, you need to be aligned with your management team. You can go in as a HR practitioner and have these fabulous ideas and want to and start doing it. But as soon as your management say, we don't have time for this, you're taking up too much time from people, they don't realize, you know, like you said, how do you tell them the return on investment? Let's take this moment. Let's grow these people. Let's get them thinking outside the box.
Yeah.
It's all about that ultimate leadership.
There's two challenges to that. Is like, there's a scarcity mindset of some leaders, and I've heard them say it directly to me in all of my years consulting. Someone will say, well, if I develop that person, they'll get poached. So I want to keep them less evolved, so to speak, which is very scarcity mindset. And what I normally respond to is like, if you create a great culture, not only will that person never want to leave, but you will attract the best people from your competitors that don't lead with culture. So before you know it, you'll have people standing at your door, and you'll have the highest performing people and thriving outcomes. But it's not just people either. I hear their voice. I've run businesses. I continue to run businesses, and I've consulted in hundreds of them. It's purpose, people, performance, profit, and planet. It's all five. And if we are naive to just expect them to spend all their money just on people as well without getting the other parts right, then you don't have efficiency, because a wheel turns best when it's round. So, and it needs all aspects of that to grow evenly.
Yeah, 100%.
And Sue, and I actually lived through this myself, in an organization where it was amazing. And that's how it actually just started all purpose, with me, and just experiencing myself and going through, for another 2.5 years to find mine. But with the leadership, when they do, Michelle, like these exercises and become clear and bring that clarity with their purpose into organization and cascade down to the others in the organization. And when you ask them to find their purpose and why they're with that family, it's a very natural organic attrition that some people resign. It's a very healthy organization where they bring all clear people with the purpose, with the right family and culture and values all together, and they succeed very well. And that is proven, with the purposeful organization. So, but they were missing the culture piece with the purpose. And that's why one of the things that I like about ShareTree is it brings everything in an algorithm, in a logic way, where you don't forget about the people's, gratitude and culture, all these like 7 layers characteristics, which, organization, they don't know how to do that. That's what I personally really believe in it.
So let's move through the costs so you can be equipped with this, because it's the most common thing that I've always seen in executive leadership and boards. So the model, and this is in your resource library. If you use the link, you'll see in your resource library, you've got this document here where you can actually put in the numbers and figures. So the example that we've got there is on a group of 100 people. So you can scale this now, these numbers in your head, down to 10, up to 1,000, up to 10,000. Yeah, it allows you to start scaling the numbers. Now on 100 people, the current engagement level, this is what we actually see from the surveys we've done. The average engagement level is 65%. So we'll start with the average that we know that's out there in the industry. The adoption level of leadership, I've put in at 85%. Yeah. So if leaders don't adopt through your initial analysis of more than 50%, so you need critical momentum to create the shift. Ideally, you want 70% and above adoption by leadership. It's not worth engaging that company for no amount of money. It's going to damage your inspiration. They're not going to get the results. So it's going to damage their time, and it's going to damage our brand collectively. So we know if there's no leadership adoption, it's 100% failure. We know if there's leadership adoption, it's 100% success. It's the main factor of outcomes of culture.
And how do you get that percentage? You know, for adoption?
Adoption will come through the next activity we're doing, which is team culture engagement. So,
yes.
And the monthly reporting. So the monthly reporting tells you whether the leaders are engaged or not with their activity at what we've seen as best practice cultures. So if we have these numbers, the average improvement that we would expect to see is about 11.9 to 12%. And what improves, so we'd see their engagement go from 65% to 77%. So this typically happens over 6 to 12 months with a culture transformation program. So there's two costs. There's the little cost of culture, which we call the staff attrition. And then there's the big cost of culture, which is productivity improvement. Now, there is a lot of immeasurable things that also contribute to the cost of culture. But let's start with the little cost. So we know through ResearchGate, 33% of salary is the cost to replace people. Now, natural attrition is always going to occur with any culture, even a thriving culture. But when you have a toxic culture, the difference is that you lose higher paid, high performing people, and you lose more of them. So you have a declining culture. If you have a growing culture, you'll be losing the people that are not aligned to the culture. They could be high or lower paid people, but they're people that are generally not performing as well because they're not inspired by the culture. There's nothing wrong with the people. You have to be inspired by what you do. It's like music choice, right? I'm not into heavy metal. You've got to find the music that suits you. It's not that heavy metal's bad music, it just doesn't suit my frequency. So you've got to find a culture that suits you. Then what we know about engagement, this is a really interesting number. So this is set NASIT for Australian dollars, but in terms of that document that's there, you can change that for US dollars. So someone's already worked on that. I'll connect you to a few practitioners in the US that have already done that. I'll give you the document. Non-engagement, 1% of non-engagement, we've seen to equal roughly 0.5% of staff attrition. So if they were at 70%, let's say they were at 80% engagement, what percentage of staff attrition might you expect to see? At 80% engagement. So every 1% of non-engagement equals 0.5% of staff attrition. So if they're 80% engaged, 20% disengagement, how much attrition might they see?
Yes.
Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute.
Yeah. So is it 1% for non-engagement?
It equals 0.5% of staff attrition. If they were 80% engaged, which means they are 20% disengaged, the attrition would be 0.5 of that, half. So 10% half.
10%.
10% would leave annually. So this organization, which is 65% engaged, meaning 35% disengaged, is roughly losing 17% of its people every year. We've tested this on a number of organizations and they're like, wow, that's incredibly accurate. So, but the cost of the loss really depends on the current culture.
Okay.
So, and their salaries and their industry. So there's a few factors there. So we've taken the average salary of Australia. So on this scenario, it's costing the organization $170,000 a year to replace staff. Yeah, to replace the staff. Now the productivity loss is directly related to the increase in engagement. So if we increase engagement by 11.9%, which is approximately 12%, when we look at a company that has a revenue per employee, these are averages again, varies by industry. So the estimated revenue for the organization based on 100 employees on an average industry is about 25 mil. And then high versus low engaged teams. So we know higher versus low performance is 21%. And we know we're increasing the performance of this team by 12%.
Oh.
So we will expect to see their profits, which would average generally 10.9%, go up by 12.5%. So their profit would move to 12.2%, which is worth to them $326,000 a year.
Wow.
So here's the simple numbers. On 100 people of average engagement, you can expect $500,000 of savings per annum. Now you've got the money to invest in culture that you ordinarily fall on deaf ears. And the best thing is once you implement this, track it and report it back to them, they'll give you more money to do it.
Yeah.
So these are just the measurable costs. Now there's also costs about attracting better talent. There's also increased revenue, but we don't put that in the calculation because we don't know the market forces. So COVID-19 is now damaging revenue. So this means the ability to convert it to profit is going to reduce. But if you have a toxic culture, the quality of that profit will also reduce. And we've seen that.
Mm-hmm.
We've got organizations that just started ShareTree that haven't yet established a culture, and ones that were 3 years mature, fully established with alignment of purpose, vision, and leadership practicing. Exactly the same industries, exactly the same size. The company that didn't yet have the culture during COVID-19 declined and ran a loss, and they cleaned out their headcount and they didn't reduce the income of the leaders. So they did a selective reduction approach, which destroyed the culture even more. Mm-hmm. Very scarcity. Yeah. Then we have another culture where there was collective collaboration, reduction of staff by group collaboration and choice. So they tackled the casuals first, then the leadership took wage reductions, and then they banded together to innovate how they could defend their income. And their profitability went up. Their income went down, but their profitability went up because everyone was now unified and focused on innovation and operating in a way that was more efficient. Yeah, they were, you could call it penny pinching, but I would say they were effective in spending dollars on what was needed right now.
Yeah.
Same size,
how much making?
Same scenario, same industry, same size, different leadership mindset.
Yeah. Yeah.
How much big impact? Like
massive impact.
You're saying massive, like
massive impact. So
okay, this is good.
Culture is really important. So if we know on 100 people it's worth $500,000, what's it worth to 1,000 people?
For those big organizations, right?
$5 million.
$5 million.
What's it worth to 10,000 people? $50 million.
50.
What's it worth to 100,000 people? $500 million.
$500 million.
$500 million.
$500 million.
So this is powerful to be able to go into organizations and measure it and quantify it for them.
This is great.
So this is just repeating those numbers that I was just saying before. So easy to remember, 10% of staff disengagement costs an organization of 100 people $500,000 a year. They're simple numbers to remember, and you can scale it up, yeah, based on the organization size. If they want to know what's behind it, then you do that spreadsheet. So when you propose a culture program for an enterprise, we always add that in so that we can show them and quantify what they could expect as a saving. Then we measure it in the program, and then we report on it as we deliver it. As long as the leadership is engaged, and you'll see how we can measure if leadership is engaged with the coming reports.